My name is Chuck Miller. I'm president of the Cleveland Heights Historical Society and chairman of the Landmark Commission in Cleveland Heights. Tonight, we're really privileged to have a presentation that, in effect, has taken about 2 years to put together. Hugh Fisher and Deanna Bremer have been working for the last couple of years researching and compiling an application for putting the Euclid Golf Allotment on the National Register of Historic Places. This Thursday is going to be one of the final steps in that process, with a hearing with some of the state officials coming up from the Historic Preservation Office to review their application. So we wish them all the best in that hearing, and we know that everything's going to work out just great. Just really short, I want to give you a quick description of the two folks that are here tonight. Hugh Fisher lives in Chatfield Drive. Hugh is a management consultant with Cohen & Company. He specializes in human resource management. His avocation is architectural history, which explains why he's devoted so much time to this project. Deanna Bremer lives on Fairmount Boulevard with her husband David and 2-year-old son Max, and her dogs Rocky and Holly. A former marketing manager, her real passion is history, and we're glad to have them here in Cleveland Heights. So without further ado, Hugh Fisher, Deanna Bremer. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that introduction. And what we're going to do is we're going to switch off talking. And first of all, how many people who are here tonight know that they live in the Euclid Golf Allotment? Quite a few. That's great. That's great. Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you everyone else for coming as well. What I'd like to do first is just give you a little roadmap of what we're going to do tonight, because we are conscious of your time, and I'm one of those people who always likes to know what's going on. No, that doesn't help. I'm trying to figure out what that little light source is there. If someone can figure that out, I think that would help people see some of the slides that we've got. Well, we'll just go forward here if you figure it out. That's great. First thing I'm going to do is give you a little bit of history about the development in the Heights, so we kind of know where we're going. Then we'll talk about what Euclid Golf is. We'll talk about the people who developed it, how they marketed it. Then we'll talk a little bit about the architectural styles and the people who designed and built the Euclid Golf homes. Then we'll talk about a few of the people who lived there initially. We'll talk a little bit about Euclid Golf today, and then we'll give you just a brief summary of what we've done in terms of getting it on the National Register of Historic Places. To give you a little bit about the early development in the Heights. Now, Cleveland was industrializing in the late 1800s, and that industrialization industries like steel and mining and all sorts of dirty, noisy industries. And so the neighborhoods that the wealthy lived in were becoming overcrowded, noisy, polluted, and unhealthful. And people were looking for a way to move away from that area. The Heights was really not touched, though, because of the fact that it was in the Heights. And it was not until the electric streetcar was invented that people were able to make it up the hill. And with the electric streetcar, then people began to develop the Heights. And one of the first people to develop the Heights was Patrick Calhoun. And he was a Southern lawyer, and he came to Cleveland in the 1890s and saw the area at the top of the hill. He was going to visit the Garfield Monument, saw the area at the top of the hill and said, this would make a wonderful, wealthy subdivision. And so he began to develop what he called Euclid Heights. And he called it Euclid Heights because, of course, Euclid Avenue is where all the wealthy in Cleveland lived. And also, contemporaneously with this, the Walton brothers laid out Cedar Heights, Grandview Avenue, and Belfield Avenue, which are right nearby. Euclid Heights were developed at around the same time, but they were done on a different model. If you look at those streets and compare them to Euclid Heights, it was a very different model. Euclid Heights was really one of the first garden suburbs. Open spaces, curved streets. The streets had English-sounding names. He planted street trees. All of this to give the effect of a garden feel. In 1896, the Cleveland Electric Railway Company extended the streetcar line up Cedar Hill, and that was really what made Calhoun's development take off. And of course, once that streetcar was up there, other people followed it as well. This is a map, a very rough map, and I drew it, so it's not so great. But you can see here you can see Cedar Road right there. North of Cedar Road is Euclid Heights. You can see all that area with the crosses in it. That's Euclid Heights that Calhoun developed. You can see where Cedar Heights is below Cedar Road here that I was talking about. That's where the Walton Brothers development was. And just to the west of that would be Ambler Heights, which is the other neighborhood, by the way, that is going to be listed on the National Register soon. And then you see Euclid Golf, the section of Euclid Golf here. And you can also see to the south here, you can see the Shaker Village. And that was what the Van Swearingen brothers were developing. So all of these areas were beginning to be developed around this time. And so let me tell you a little bit about Euclid Heights then. Now, Euclid Heights was laid out by the landscape architect E.W. Bowditch, and he was from Boston. He laid out Euclid Heights on the Garden City model, as I was saying before, the curved streets. There were also deed restrictions, which was an attempt to control the development, because remember back then there was no zoning. So really the only way that you could, as a developer, kind of control things was to put in deed restrictions. So in 1901, Calhoun opened up the Euclid Club, this should be Euclid Heights, to spur sales. Then the Euclid Club is something that he said that he needed to have in his allotment to attract the wealthy to his allotment. He thought, well, if I have sort of a country club, golf was becoming very popular at the time, then people would be willing to come up here and make their home here. This is a picture of the Euclid Club. It was designed by Mead and Garfield architects. It opened in 1901. And the golf course was laid out by Bertie Way. And this is another picture of it. You can see the golf links there. And sure. And this is a drawing of the golf links. And this map is flipped. North is down here and south is going up there. But if we can find the Euclid Clubhouse there, and you can see that that is just north of Cedar Road. And Norfolk is right there. Today there's a parking lot there. That'll give you some orientation. Then if you can move over here, you can see that there's the Alcazar. And you can see holes 1 and 2. And then 3 through 8 are in the approximate area of South Overlook and Delaware Drive. And then it comes back across the street, across Cedar to hole number 9, which would take you back to the golf course, because what happened was when Calhoun wanted to lay out this golf course, the golf pro quickly told him that you don't have enough land for a proper 18-hole course. So what was he going to do? Well, his neighbor to the south of him, John D. Rockefeller, owned this property that Hugh is showing you right here, and allowed him to use it rent-free, basically, for $1 a year. He said, you can use this land for the other part of your golf course. The only thing is, I don't want anyone playing golf on Sunday. So they had to lay out the course this way so that on Sundays you could do holes 1 through 9 twice, and you'd end up back at the clubhouse. And then on the other days you could come back, and then you could do the other 9 holes. But that's the way they laid it out. And that worked for a while. So the club opened in 1901, and that worked for a while. Eventually, people started getting tired of that because guess what? Sunday was their favorite day to play golf. So that was a little tiresome. And then other developments were happening.
Including the streetcar.
And the streetcar, which I will mention too. The streetcar went through. The other thing that happened is that, and this is John D. Rockefeller. This picture was taken in 1884. Doesn't look dapper. And a little bit about John D. Rockefeller. A lot of people know that he owned land in the Cleveland Heights area. He owned a lot of land east of Cleveland. He had a summer home called Forest Hill in northern Cleveland Heights and East Cleveland area. And he invested in a lot of Heights real estate. In fact, he was an investor in the Euclid Heights allotment. And he purchased the other part of the Streeter Dairy Farm, which is, Streeter Dairy Farm is what Euclid Heights was built on. He purchased the other portion of that, and Grant Deming developed it in 1909, and he called that allotment Forest Hills. So just to confuse everybody, he called that allotment Forest Hill in 1909. It's not the Forest Hill that we know today. He was also an investor in the Shaker Heights Land Company, which was the Van Swearingen development. So he was an investor there as well. And in fact, he donated some of the land along Doan Brook which is around North Park there, to the City of Cleveland Park system. He was one of the people who made that happen. Now, he owned the land, as I said, across Cedar Road from Euclid Heights, and he leased it to the Euclid Club. The upper 9 holes were there, didn't allow golf on Sunday. And then in 1906, the Van Sweringens, who were developing that property to the south, asked him if they could put a streetcar line through, because they realized that their development was not going to take off unless they had transportation. So he agreed that he would have the streetcar go from Cedar through his property down what became Fairmount Boulevard. And so that started in 1906. So here you have a golf course with a streetcar right in the middle of it. The Euclid Club disbanded in 1912. Obviously, all of these factors, the development that was happening around here, around it, the streetcar, all of those conspired to have Rockefeller say, you know, there probably is a better use for this land. In fact, he got many proposals for it. And this man approached him. This is Barton Roy Deming, B.R. Deming. He was born in Canada in 1875, and he was one of 10 children. He was the 9th of 10 children. He followed several of his brothers to Cleveland, and several of them were involved in real estate. And in 1904, he got his real estate license, and he helped his brothers establish the Deming Brothers Company. And they developed quite a bit of property in East Cleveland. And then in 1913, he became associated with Rockefeller when he proposed the development of what he would call Euclid Golf. And his B.R. Deming Company built many Euclid Golf homes as well. So in addition to being a developer, his company was also a builder. And he lived at 2485 Fairmount Boulevard until the death of his wife, Helen, and the marriage of his only daughter, Elaine Allen. And 2485 Fairmount Boulevard is probably a house that you will recognize, and we'll see it in just a little bit. First, I want to show you some photographs that we have of the Euclid Golf property before it was developed. This photo was taken in 1913, and you can see the double streetcar tracks going right through there. You can also see the golf links. You see the open spaces there. And then in the background, you see that building. That is the original Roxborough School. So you can see all the way through. I think this photo was taken about Ardley Circle, where Ardley Circle is today, and you can see the schoolhouse there.
Ardley would move off in this direction right here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where that streetcar line went or ended?
It went from Cedar, and it went down Fairmount Boulevard to approximately Eaton would be the street. Mm-hmm. And then later there was a spur that went down Coventry, and then that existed for a few years, and then it was taken away when the Van Sweringens got their Kingsbury Run and their current the streetcars there in Shaker Heights. This is another photograph. This one was also taken in 1913, and you can see the streetcar there, and you can also see the dirt path of people walking along the tracks, and also in the background you can see some housing. Okay, this next picture here is the Euclid Golf allotment as it was originally laid out. This is taken from the original sales brochure that Deming put together in 1913. This is what he showed Rockefeller. This is what he said, this is what I want to do. And you can see Fairmount Boulevard there. And basically Fairmount followed the streetcar tracks. And that's one of the reasons why there's that very narrow strip of property up there that Deming built his own house on, was because that was the route the streetcar took, and so that was the shape of the lots there. And so this shows it in its entirety. You can see Ardley Drive over here, and then all the way over to Coventry on this side. Clarkson Road is kind of the northern boundary there. Although Demington Drive all the way up to Cedar on the, I guess that would be the west side, is that right? Is also included. And you can see that those homes along Cedar Road were already existing property at the time. Notting Hill Lane is part of the Euclid Golf allotment. That was put in by Deming. And as you
This right here is where the golf links came through. The clubhouse was approximately right here, and the 10th hole started here and went up, and you looped around, and 18 ended there.
And now there are those two grand apartment houses right there. And you can see the southern boundary is basically West St. James until you get to Demington, and then it goes a little bit farther south to Scarborough Road. So those are the boundaries of the Euclid Golf allotment. Okay. So here's a little bit about developing Euclid Golf. Deming from the beginning told Rockefeller that he wanted to build the finest residential neighborhood in Cleveland. And one of the first things that he did was he retained Howell and Thomas architects. He thought it very important that he had some fine residence architects that would oversee, that was first of all design the model homes, but also would oversee all of the other construction in the allotment. And he used Garden City principles, again, this idea of conforming to the landscape, creating picturesque views. That's why we have Ardley Circle, for example, the little planted circle. The streets are curving. The homes are situated in such a way that they create picturesque views. There's an emphasis on street trees to create that canopy. The names are also English, following Calhoun there. And the other thing he did, also following Calhoun, which was beginning to become common practice, was to impose restrictions on buyers, architects, builders through deed restrictions, because again, there's no zoning at this point in time. So these deed restrictions spelled out non-compatible uses. You remember, people are coming from Euclid Avenue, and one of the reasons why they want to move is because commercial interests are impinging upon their property, and there's really nothing that they can do to stop it. So incompatible uses, saying there aren't going to be boarding houses here, there aren't going to be manufacturing sites here. All of those things were important to put into the deed restrictions. So that people would know that when they purchased a piece of property in this allotment, that was the way it was going to be. It was always going to be residential. They also required investment levels. This was a way to protect people from building a grand house only to have somebody right next door build a very modest house. So he set it up in such a way that on the boulevard there was a certain minimum investment level they had to do, and on the side streets there was a lower but still a minimum investment level that people had to meet in order to build there. Required setbacks so that everything would be in harmony. The houses were all set back evenly. Now, these deed restrictions were in place until May 1st, 1950, and that he must have thought that that was enough period of time to give people the assurance they needed in order to buy into the allotment. Now, he also built 3 homes south of Euclid Golf, which we did include in our National Register application, to block a poor view. There was another development that was going on back there, and he just decided that I better purchase this property and build some homes there to block the view, because again, it's this garden principle idea that views are important. And Hugh, did you want to show them where those were? Is that why you paged back there? Right down there on that side of West St. James.
And we'll show you pictures of those
In just a bit.
upcoming.
Okay. All right. And he marketed to the elite in Cleveland because he realized that in order to get people to move into his allotment, that was where he was going to have to go first. Those are the people who had the means, and once those people would move into the allotment, then others would follow. So he also built his own house in part as an advertisement. This is the first thing you see when you come up the hill and you enter into Euclid Golf is his own house. This is 2485, where he lived for 25 years. And it's on a very narrow strip of land, incredibly narrow strip of land. It's only 1 room deep, or 1 room wide, I should say. It's several rooms deep. And a very unusual house. So Howell and Thomas designed this for him. This is a picture of the gardens and the pergola that you can see up here. You can't really see the stone wall, but you're up there on top of that, and that pergola is still there and has been incorporated into those new townhomes. And this picture was, by the way, it was taken in 1920.
And right here is the large house at the corner of Ardley and Fairmount. And that actually, at this time, would have actually been under construction in about 1920.
And you can also see the streetcar tracks back there and the poles to hold up the lines. Thank you. This is a picture. This one was also, let's see, this one was taken in 1917. Yeah. We don't know, you can see the Deming house in the back there. So this is his gardens. This is in the gorge there, part of which I think has been filled in, I'm not sure. And we don't know who all these people are. One person, the man with the hat may be Barton Deming, we're not sure. The little girl either here, this little girl here might be his daughter, and the other little kids may be his nieces and nephews. Grant Deming's children. And this is just an interior shot of the Deming house as it looked, and this photo was taken in 1920. All of these photos, by the way, were we got from his grandson who lives in Avon on the west side of Cleveland. So with that, Hugh is going to talk now. He's going to tell you a little bit about marketing.
Deming was really very, very advanced as a real estate developer. He utilized a lot of different marketing techniques, and that's really one of the reasons why Euclid Golf really became very, very famous actually throughout the country. He utilized brochures to publicize the allotment. He actually published two. The first was published in about 1914. We'll show you that. And then in 1921, he published a very elaborate brochure. This is a copy of the original brochure. It was just a fold-out pamphlet, and this shows some of the very earliest houses that he had actually constructed himself in order to get the allotment going. This house is on North St. James. This is on, I believe, Tudor or Woodmere. So this, which page down to the next one. This is the inside of the brochure, and here again he's just showing the quality of the houses that he's building and the picturesque setting. This here is showing his house. These are the three original houses on Chatfield. This is actually Chatfield and Clarkson right here. This is a house on North St. James. This is the very first house that he built in the allotment. This is on Fairmount, and this was built in 1913. So here he's starting the marketing process. In 1921, he published a very elaborate brochure. It was about 50 pages. And this is an example. There's a few examples here of the illustrations that he put in this brochure. This is actually 2574 Fairmount. This is the house, the kind of yellow house on Fairmount, which was designed by Howell and Thomas. This is 2222 Delamere, which was the Roland White house. It's that beautiful stone house on Delamere. He's even showing an interior shot. And this is a house that was actually under construction at the time that he took the photograph. Actually, if you look closely at the photograph, it's kind of doctored. The front door is drawn in, and actually there's some dormers that are drawn in on top of there. But this is a house on Coventry. And about half the brochure was those kinds of photographs, and the other half were elaborate advertisements. And this is an example of the Moat Vapor Heat Company advertisement. And this, and what they're doing here is they're showing this is actually the Thomas White house on Delamere. And a lot of the advertisements will actually, give the names of the people that they did work for in the allotment.
You may not recognize the house on Delamere initially because it has been added onto. It's probably 2 or 3 times the size of that right there.
Yeah, we'll actually have a photograph of that a little bit later. Deming also marketed extensively, as Deanna had said, by advertising the allotment, and he ran weekly advertisements in Cleveland Town Topics, and this next slide shows actually in October 15th, 1914 edition, he actually had the cover of Cleveland Town Topics, and this is a drawing that he used quite a bit, showing the entrance to Euclid Golf. Go ahead.
And that little drive there does still exist. Of course, it doesn't look anything like that now.
This is an example of the sort of advertisement that you would see every week, and they all pretty much looked like this. Almost all of them had a drawing of a house, the original architectural rendering. and then a description of either the house that was being constructed or a house that you could construct, and then just talking about the beauty of the allotment. Actually, this house was not constructed. This is a house that we believe Howell and Thomas designed, as was one of the series of houses that they designed for Barton Deming. And we're pretty certain that this house is actually a French version of the English house that was built for A.C. Ernst at the corner of Ardley and Fairmount. The fenestration is the same, the massing is the same. It's just a French chateau-esque version of the English house that it wound up there. And actually the plate here says a proposed residence for Euclid Golf Allotment.
The other thing about these drawings, actually, is that his nephew claims that B.R. Deming was one of the first real estate people anywhere to really use drawings of houses to sell real estate. It just wasn't done before this.
And we just stuck this here. It kind of falls in chronological order. This is another 1913 picture of Demington, actually the actual excavation of Demington Drive. And right here are the tracks, of course. This would become the Fairmount Boulevard, and actually Deming did us a favor when he took these photographs. He actually marked these things for history. We believe that this is looking north. So that gives you an idea of what it looked like at that time. Another way that Deming marketed was he actually had offices, real estate allotment offices, and this was his first office that he had at the corner. This is actually Coventry right here, and actually where this building is standing is approximately where St. Paul's sign is. You can see the railroad tracks curving around right here, and the point of Fairmount and Coventry is over here. So this was the first allotment office that he erected. You can see a big sign there advertising. This was there for just a short time. This was his permanent office that was at the corner of Demington and Fairmount. This is the northeast corner of Demington and Fairmount. So he had a very quaint building built, and this is where you could come to look at land. You could look at existing drawings for houses. And this is what it looked. This photograph was dated October 1914, so this is very early in the development. This next photograph this is also dated October 1914. This is taken this would be Roxborough, where it comes out onto Fairmount, and this is looking east, and actually right there is the allotment office that we were just looking at. So you can see as early as, as late as October 1914, it still was not improved. He still had big piles of dirt lying around, and actually the very first house that he built was already existing back in the woods here, the one that he built in 1913. Also, part of the marketing that he did, he achieved quite a bit of recognition for the allotment, and in 1917 the Architectural Forum published an article about his home and featured his home in many photographs. In 1921, the Architectural Forum published a 15-page article devoted to Euclid Golf. They did a complete treatment of the allotment, lots of illustrations, lots of photographs and floor plans, and a lot of copy, really celebrating what Deming had achieved. As early as 1921, they're talking about Deming's accomplishment as very, very significant, and really recognizing it as a very, very successful planned community where he set high standards, and he really even at that point they were saying that Deming was living up to the expectations that he had set. Deanna, I think it's in that article that they actually talk about it being the Euclid Avenue of the Heights, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it may, and it's also in several ads that he begins to talk about it as being the Euclid Avenue of the Heights. And so whether that's something that that phrase is something he coined or whether someone else said it, he certainly capitalized on it as being, this is the place. People are moving from Euclid Avenue, and they're moving to the Heights, and they're moving to Fairmount Boulevard.
We had mentioned before that he actually built 3 houses that were outside of the allotment, and this is one of them. This is a double that's at the foot of Tudor. And so when you look down Tudor, this is what you see. And actually they talk about this in the 1921 article, that Deming was really trying to protect his allotment and the investment that people were making. And he built this building to block the view of another housing development that did not live up to the standards that he had. This house was designed by Howell and Thomas. Right next to that, to the left, are these 2, what they call cottages. One was designed by Howell and one was designed by Thomas. So these were the 3 houses that he built to block the view of the allotment. And Howell and Thomas, very, very significant firm. We're learning actually quite a bit about them and doing a lot more research. Carl Eugene Howell and James Thomas, they founded their firm originally in Columbus, and that's where they started practicing together. Thomas actually apprenticed under Cass Gilbert, a very famous architect. As we talked about, Deming selected Howell and Thomas to design the initial homes and to approve other architects' designs. So far in our research, we found that that Howell and Thomas is responsible for at least 176 of the 280 homes in Euclid Golf, and there's a lot of houses that we don't have records for, and they probably designed a lot more. That's pretty significant. They also were very prolific in other areas of Shaker Heights and Cleveland Heights. And one quick aside, part of the fun of doing a project like this is that you wind up meeting a lot of very interesting people, and we actually looked for and found a descendant of James Thomas. And actually we found the family. They're actually still in town, and we contacted them a couple of years ago and said that we were doing research, wanted to try to learn more about the firm. And the grandsons are still in town, and they said, well, we don't know much, but we think in grandfather's, James Thomas's house they still owned, and they believed that there was some drawings that were still hanging around their grandfather's house. About a year later, they called us back and said, well, we were wrong. There's not a few drawings hanging around. There's actually thousands of drawings. And Deanna and I were lucky enough to go visit them, and they had pulled all this material out of the attic, and there's literally thousands of original architectural drawings. So basically, Howell and Thomas's entire office still exists, and they're in the process of cataloging those, and they're probably going to be donating them to an institution here in Cleveland somewhere. And so one of the wonderful asides, and they were thrilled because they didn't know what they had, and it was the first time anyone had taken interest in their family's firm. So something really neat that happened too. And you're up next.
We're going to switch back. I'm going to talk just briefly about, well, actually, I guess it's not so briefly, but a little bit about the architectural styles in Euclid Golf. And really, you can kind of break this up into 2 different sections. One are the homes that were built in the 1910s, and then the homes that are built in the 1920s. And they're very different. And when we see some pictures, you'll be able to tell that. And primarily, that's because of World War I. A lot of people went over to Europe during the war, both architects and potential homeowners, saw all the homes there and started doing much more accurate revival styles in the U.S. when they came back. So what you see in the 1910s, and there are 3 different styles that you see in Euclid Golf. One we call the shingle style, which is basically wood shingling all around the house, continuously around the house and on the roof. The arts and crafts style, which is an English movement, but also was popularized in California, known as the craftsman style. And this is a style that has very low-pitched roofs, gabled roofs that are wide, that have wide unenclosed eaves with the decorative beams underneath. Also the sloping or curved porch supports, and we'll see some of those, and the prairie-style windows. And the prairie style is a very American style, and of course people know Frank Lloyd Wright sort of popularized this style, but it's very much the horizontal style, so everything is emphasizing the horizontal lines of the home. So the roofs are low-pitched, hip roofs, widely overhanging eaves. The porches also have the massive square supports. Everything looks very geometric, including the window patterns. And we're going to see some pictures here. This is the house we talked about. Is the very first house to be built in Euclid Gulf. It was built in 1913. The architect was P.E. Robinson. And this may have been just before Deming hired Howell and Thomas. That may be why P.E. Robinson did it. But you can take a look at this house and you notice that it still has its original wood shingle roof. And this is just a basic colonial style. You can see that the entrance porch is emphasized there. This is a shingle-style house. This house, unfortunately, does not have its wood roof any longer, but you can see how the shingles, the top part of it, sort of wrap all the way around the house. And this would be an example. It's actually a mix, but this house definitely shows some prairie influences. If you take a look at the roof and the porch there, you see the horizontal being emphasized there. And this house can show some craftsman elements. If you look at the entry porch there, and you'll see the beams, the braces here. Let's see if I can get this thing to work. There it is. See right here? You can see the craftsman elements there. You can notice the curved roof. And
But
so
a very eclectic house, which is what was going on in architecture at the time.
Right. And now we'll get into the 1920s. And in the 1920s, things look very different. They're much more accurate historical revival styles. And the most prevalent of those is the colonial revival style. And almost 50% of Euclid Gulf homes are colonial style. Some of those were built in the 1910s, but primarily those were built in the 1920s. And as I said before, those have the accentuated front doorways. They're usually symmetrical. The windows have double-hung sashes. And there are really three types, and we'll show you each of these, Dutch, Georgian, and Adam. And why don't we go ahead and show those, and I'm going to talk through them. This is one that's really the Adam style, and the reason why it's the Adam style, you can see the accentuated front doorway here, but you also notice the fan lights and the circular light over here, and that's characteristic of the Adam style. Notice the gambrel roof here. This is an example of the Dutch style colonial. And I think we have another example of that as well. Here's one to the side here. And again, these homes are eclectic as well. So you'll see other elements of other styles in them as well. This is a Georgian style home, and this is actually a model home that was done by Howell and Thomas and was featured in the big brochure that he did. And he called it the shingled Westover style. But it is essentially a Georgian style home. You see the dormers here. It's very symmetrical. In the hipped roof, etc.
This house they used as a show house, actually, and I believe it was Sterling Welch that decorated the house, and it was taglined, "A home in good taste."
And this is kind of the classic Georgian-style home. It's completely symmetrical. It's got the hipped roof. You can see also the chimneys are symmetrical. This chimney is completely false. This one is a working one. You can see the molding here, the dental molding here. You can even see the little finials here on the sides. Everything is symmetrical, everything is open, large windows. And the other most popular style is the Tudor Revival style. This one is almost 25% of Euclid Gulf homes are Tudor Revival style. And we'll just go through these as we see the pictures again. One of the things about the Tudor Revival style are these prominent front gables here. Here's another example of it, a more streamlined version of it, but yet still Tudor. And here's another. You can also notice the leaded glass windows here, which are also characteristic of Tudor style. And another example, prominent gables here. Another style that was popular was the French Renaissance style, and really less than 5% of Euclid Golf homes fit within this style. This is one of the styles, though, that the Van Swearingen brothers picked for Shaker Heights, and we do have some examples of it in Euclid Golf. This is the house that we showed you before in the ad for the Moet Vapor. It was added on to. It is still a French style. You see the very high-pitched hip roof here, but it looks quite different from the way it was originally built, doesn't it?
The Thomas White had a huge addition put on in 1929.
At least double the size of the house, I believe. Here's another example of it, of a French style, and you can see again the very high-pitched hip roof here. There's some half timbering here, and there's also a tower here, which is another, with a balcony there, which is also characteristic of French Revival. Another style is the Italian Renaissance style, and I'll go through this as we show it. These typically have tile roofs, although we did find some in Euclid Golf that actually had slate roofs. The other thing about the Italian style is it usually does have the accentuated doorway, and then the top windows are generally smaller than the bottom windows. The bottom windows generally have this sort of half arch over them, as you can see here. And here's another example. This house is actually kind of interesting because if you just look at the bottom and pretend the roof is not there, it looks very Italianate with the arched windows and the accentuated doorway here, the different size windows, etc. If you look at the top, it looks very colonial Revival. So like I said, there are quite a few eclectic houses in Euclid Golf, and sometimes that makes it difficult if you're not an architect or an architectural historian to type them. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the architects here, and I picked out just a few of the architects. We've already mentioned Howell and Thomas, who did a great number of homes in Euclid Golf, but there were other architects who were very prominent. Some of them are nationally prominent, and some of them are only locally prominent, and there are a couple that you may not have heard before, and I'd like to start with this first one, Harold Fullerton, which is probably one that you have not heard about, but you should. We don't actually know much about him, and that's one of the problems. He practiced in Cleveland from 1924 to 1932, and then he basically disappeared. What we have been able to find out about him is that he was born in Youngstown, studied architecture at the University of Michigan, and he served in World War I. And I hypothesize that because he did that, that is why his buildings are so great, because when we show you some examples, they're just incredible examples of Revival-style architecture. These are some of the things that he did. One of them is Belgian Village on Fair Hill Road. Many of you are familiar with that. The other architect here is one who is prominent nationally, Boston architect Charles Greco. And he came to Cleveland in 1924 to design the temple. And he also did the temple on the Heights. And while he was here, he also designed a couple Euclid Golf homes. This is a house that on Fairmount Boulevard in Euclid Golf that Howard Fullerton designed. And I think it's one of the loveliest ones. This is another one here, and I'm just going to page through till I get all the way up to here so I know exactly where these are. This is on Scarborough Road. And this is on Demington. This is just where Clarkson intersects with Demington.
This is a Greco.
I'm sorry, yes, this is a Greco. And this next one is also a Greco. Ed should be happy. You get the sign there. And Mead and Hamilton, of course, most people know about Mead and Hamilton. They were the leading domestic architects in Cleveland from 1911 until 1927. Now, Mead worked with Charles Schweinfurth, who was one of the prominent architects who did Euclid Avenue mansions, and then with Abram Garfield, who was the son of President Garfield. And a descendant of the Garfields actually lives on Ardley Drive. So you do meet interesting people when you're doing this kind of stuff. And they designed homes everywhere that was anywhere in Cleveland, and they did several homes in Euclid Golf, as you can see. This home here is on Delamere. And this one is on Fairmount. And the next architect is Charles Schneider, and you may have heard of him before because he designed Stan Hewitt Hall in Akron. He trained under Mead and Garfield, studied at the École des Beaux-Arts, and taught architecture at the Cleveland School of Architecture at Case. And he designed several homes on Fairmount, and we've listed them all there. We think he probably did some on the side streets, but we just don't have the records for them. It seems likely that he would have. Charles Schweinfurth, as I mentioned before, he was the architect of many, many Euclid Avenue homes, and it is rumored that 2504 Fairmount was his last commission.
That's a Schneider.
This is a Schneider.
That's on Fairmount.
This also is a Schneider on Fairmount. And this is the Schweinfurth house. Now, the house was built by J. Wentworth Smith, who was a master stonemason. And there are several other homes in the Heights that J. Wentworth Smith designed. In fact, they're pretty close by. They're not in Euclid Gulf, but knowing that he was a master stonemason, you probably could pick them out if you saw them. And do we have that photo? Oh, we didn't include that photo. But there is one on the corner of Grandview and West St. James that's now a group home. He did that one. There's another one nearby on North Park that he also did. These are the stone homes. When you drive down there, you'll recognize them. Here's another architect that you probably have never heard of before, Harlan Shimon. And he is somebody that I think somehow or other just kind of got lost out of the history books, but he was incredibly prolific. And when you start researching architecture in Cleveland Heights, it's amazing how many Shimon houses you find. Here's an example. In 1911, he had over 40 buildings under construction at one time. Possibly the reason why he's not that familiar to people is because he really had no formal architectural education. And this is a time when architects were really struggling to get recognition as a profession, and so they may have shunned him for that reason. He worked under Charles Hopkinson for 13 years, started out sort of as an engineer, and really worked his way up to his lead architect. So he learned on the job. He went into business for himself in 1904, and he designed many, many homes in East Cleveland, and in Cleveland Heights. And we've got some pictures. This is one on Coventry. This is not Euclid Gulf, but this is one of his homes. This home is, can you help me out here, Hugh?
Woodmere.
This is on Woodmere. Interesting. And this one is on Chatfield. Another architect that you may be familiar with is Frederick Striebinger. Now, he was said to be the first Clevelander to study at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And he designed many landmarks, and we'll show you some of those we'll show you at least one of those that you are probably familiar with, the Tremaine Gallagher house. And this house here, which is on Demington. And another one on Delamere. And one thing you'll notice that he was a very versatile architect. He could do something in the Beaux-Arts style, and he could also do something more modest, like this shingle-style house. Walker and Weeks, they moved to Cleveland in 1905 to help with the group plan, and started their own practice, and became very successful, best known for their commercial and public buildings, however, and not for residential architecture. So all of these public buildings that you see here, they did, including Severance Hall and St. Paul's Episcopal Church. And they designed only a few homes, but this is one of them on Fairmount Boulevard. Builders. We mentioned that the B.R. Deming Company was not only a developer, but also a builder. And so he had his own building department and really did that, I think, to control quality and control costs. Another builder that was pretty prevalent in Euclid Gulf and elsewhere in Shaker Heights was Ray C. Jones, and we really don't know too much about him, but we know he built some great houses, and these are some of them here. Another builder is Benjamin Calvin Hinnick. He was a real estate and insurance broker and apparently did building on the side, but as a side business, he was absolutely incredible. He really built some of the finest homes in Euclid Gulf and in early Shaker Village. Unfortunately, the stock market crash really affected him. I think he had a lot of money invested in real estate, and he decided that it was better for him to jump out a window in 1936 rather than continue on. He was only 35. Here are some of the early homeowners in Euclid Gulf, just to give you a sampling. A.C. Ernst, we showed you his house at the corner of Fairmount and Ardley. He was the founding partner for Ernst & Ernst, which of course became Ernst & Young. Thomas White was the vice president of the White Motor Company. Charles Forster was the president of Packard Motor Company, so Cleveland's auto industry was represented. Roland White was related to Thomas White, and you can see that he was also treasurer of the Fuller Canneries Company. So it gives you kind of a flavor of the types of industries people were in. And of course, there were also people who were involved in real estate who bought homes in Euclid Golf. And now Hugh's going to tell you a little bit about Euclid Golf today.
Some of the, this is actually some of the statistics that we wound up with as part of our, application for the National Register. What is Euclid Golf in the final analysis? It's about 142 acres. There's actually 432 structures. 282 of them are homes, one church and one commercial building. That's the Heights Medical Building. Significantly, only 23% or 5% are what we call non-contributing structures. And what that means is for the National Register, we had to have a period of significance, and that period of significance was when the allotment was started in 1913, and we took it through
1950 when the deed restrictions were repealed. And so there were only 23 structures, and that includes both homes and garages that were built after that period, or that were so altered that they were no longer contributing.
And of the 23, I think only 14
Were homes.
Were homes that are non-contributing. And almost every house was built between 1913 and 1930, which really makes a very, very cohesive neighborhood, and that's one of the reasons why it turned out so successful. But as early as 1919, oh, by the way, one of the other sources of information that we went to was the actual Rockefeller archives, who supplied us with mountains of copies of letters between Deming and Rockefeller's realty company, which was called Abington Realty. And in one of those letters, well, we even have all the legal documents for Deming purchasing the land eventually. As early as 1919, one of Rockefeller's agents said that real estate people throughout the country know of Euclid Golf as one of the most beautiful and attractive neighborhoods anywhere in the United States. So as early as that, it was really recognized as a very, very significant area. Today, we believe it maintains that character. Everything's very well preserved, almost no alterations to the houses at all, remains very highly cohesive. Want to just briefly talk about how to research your house, because this is really how it all started for Deanna and I. We were both researching our houses and independently starting to do research on Euclid Golf, and we wound up coming together and pooling our resources, and that's when we decided we really need to work on getting getting Euclid Golf on the National Register. But I really encourage you, if you're interested, to start researching your house, because it really is a fascinating process and it will yield really, really interesting information. Just a couple things that you can do. Usually it starts with a title search. You need to go to the county, get into the county records, and that's the county facility downtown. What you need is a parcel number, and they will show you a plat map. And what they used to do is actually write all the owners of a piece of land right on the map. And that's really the place to start, to find out all the people who owned your piece of land. And once you've got those names, you can start to really find out about the people who lived in your house. We urge you to go see Kara at City Hall, and she'll be able to show you other plat books. Also, she'll be able to pull any building permits that may exist. Most of the building permits do exist. Some are missing, but unfortunately for Deanna and I, both of our houses were built in 1924, and all the 1924 permits are missing. So we don't know who our architect is, so imagine that. But that'll tell you a lot about your house initially. The way to research people connected with your house, the Cleveland necrology file, which is all online now. It's all online at the Cleveland Public Library website, and so you can put in any name and find and bring up, usually bring up the obituary. And the early obituaries had all the relatives listed. They had the addresses where people lived, so you can get a lot of information from that. City directories are invaluable. Cleveland Heights Library has most of the city directories, And these were, they dwarfed our current phone books. They're very, very thick books. Everybody in town is listed with their occupation and their address. So you can find out by looking at a city directory what people did. Urge you to look in the current phone book too, because you can often find relatives of, and that I actually found the grandson of the builder of my house by looking in the phone book. He lives on Meadowbrook. Let me just give you an example of some of the stuff that you can find. I live at 2284 Chatfield, and I found out some really interesting things. Other sources of information, look for clues in your house. Sometimes you can find information that will lead you to people. The linen closet in my house has, I knew of one of the families, they're named the Jordans, and the linen closet had the kids' names on each shelf. Each kid had their own shelf. And one of the kids' name was Alf Jordan. I got on the internet, put his name in, and boom, immediately his name came up with an email address in Maine. I sent him an email, and it was him. His family owned my house for 45 years, and I found him like that on the internet, and he's become a great friend. He's been back to the house. Urge you to go to the Plain Dealer and the Cleveland Press and Sun Press. You'll find a lot of information. The Sun Press is where I found the original advertisement for my house. It was listed for $38,000 by the builder who built it in 1924. He built it on spec. Go to the Cleveland Press archives, which is at Cleveland State, and I actually found a whole sheaf of articles about the original owner of my house. The original owner of my house, his name was Harry Woodhead. He was a prominent business person in town. He was the general manager of Truscott Steel, and he was featured a lot in the Plain Dealer in the Cleveland Press. There was even a feature article about him, about his pipe collection. He smoked pipes and had 200 of them. And that's where I actually found a photograph of him. So, and he also, interestingly, went on to run some very large aircraft companies in California, and actually pioneered the mass production of B-24 bombers. So, and he became very, very instrumental in the World War II effort. And this guy was the original owner of my house. And just by doing a little bit of digging, you can find just some tremendously interesting things. Mentioned the internet. That's how I found Alf Jordan. His father was an internationally known ear, nose, and throat surgeon. Just, again, tremendous information. So I urge you, that's just a little bit of a sampling of the sorts of things that you can find. That's my house. That's where all that happened, and that's what kind of brings it all to life for you when you start to find out about the people who lived in your house. About the National Register of Historic Places. What is it? It's the official list of properties recognized by the federal government as worthy of preservation. What makes it eligible? First of all, the property must be at least 50 years old, has to retain its basic historic integrity, and has to meet one of 4 criteria that the government has to have significance for association with broad patterns of history. That's, Euclid Golf falls into that category. That's really the Garden City movement. Have association with lives of persons of significance in our past. We didn't use that as one of our criteria because ours is a neighborhood.
Yeah, that's George Washington slept here. That's
right.
What that is.
We did use C, have architectural merit, because almost every house in Euclid Golf has architectural merit. And D, have the potential to yield information important to history or prehistory. That's really, that really has to do more with like burial mounds and those sorts of things. What does the National Register listing do? Well, first of all, it raises awareness and we think pride. I mean, it caused us to do all this digging, and 2 years later we dug up all this information. So it caused us to do that. It may make you eligible for federal tax incentives. And is there not something?
There is legislation right now for income-producing properties. If your property is in a historic district, that you can get tax incentives for that. Currently, there isn't the same legislation for owner-occupied housing, but they're talking about it, and they continue to talk about it. And if they ever do pass it, a lot of neighborhoods are going to want to get on the National Register, so we're going to get there first, hopefully.
and it's often a prerequisite for funding from nonprofit organizations. Importantly, what it does not do, it does not prevent a property owner from altering their property in any way. There's some confusion about that, and actually there is a community meeting on Thursday where the state's going to come in and talk about these facts about the National Register. And one of the most important ones that people want to know about is, well, can I paint my house? Well, yes, you can do anything to your house. And it does not obligate you to make any repairs. This is just a summary of some of the things that you have to do to get a property listed. We had talked about the criteria, those 4 criteria. There's a very complex government form that has to be filled out. But we did a preliminary application. We then held a preliminary neighborhood meeting. We did that about a year ago, and we sent a flyer around to everyone in Euclid Golf, inviting them to come over to the meeting hall at St. Paul's so we could talk about what we had found out about Euclid Golf so far and just see if there was any objections. We wanted to make sure that everyone was happy with what we were doing. Then we started the long process of doing the research. We took hundreds of photographs. We had to provide duplicate copies of black and white photos of about 100 different houses and street views. We have also providing slides because that's what the government wants, so we did it. Our application is probably about 100 pages long of really essays setting forth the significance of the area and outlining or actually going into great detail about the history. The Ohio Historic Preservation Office they've just completed the process of, or actually, they did go through the process of reviewing our initial application, and they sent it back and asked for a few changes. And the next step is the one that's happening Thursday, where we'll hold the public meeting. And then they're going to have a quarterly meeting where they're going to make the decision at the state level as to whether or not Euclid Golf is worthy to put on the National Register. If it is, they actually send it to the National Park Service, and it's the Department of Interior that actually says, yes, you're on the National Register. And we just talked about the fact that they're reviewing our application. We're holding the public meeting. We do expect to get approval. Euclid Golf meets all the criteria, and it has the added benefit of just being incredibly significant, incredibly well documented. And actually, we're lucky that way, because most neighborhoods don't have a fraction of the documentation that we're lucky enough to have.
So we do expect listing sometime in August, is what they're saying.
Why don't you talk about it?
Okay, and I'll just talk a little bit about this and sort of what's next. There is, because we're expecting to be listed in August, the Cedar Fairmount Business Association, the Friends of Cedar Fairmount, Future Heights came to us and said, well, we're holding a community celebration in August. It's one of the weekends in August, and would you like to participate? And of course we said yes. There is going to be a fun historical walk of the Euclid Golf neighborhood in August, and partly that will be to celebrate hopefully our nomination, our listing by then. Also, you should know that the National Preservation Conference is happening in Cleveland this October, from October 8th through 12th. And Cleveland Heights will have 2 new historic districts, hopefully, Euclid Golf and then Ambler Heights, which we showed you earlier. Ambler Heights is basically on the same path that Euclid Golf is. It was another citizen who wrote up that nomination, and it is expected to be approved at around the same time. So with all of this, we've had a lot of fun doing this, and we hope that we inspire some other people to do the same with their houses and their neighborhoods.
Any questions? Yes.
What about the whole neighborhood on Euclid Heights Boulevard in that development?
That,
It seems like it has a lot of, not big houses, but actually just a whole different style of architecture.
and Eric is talking about the Euclid Heights allotment itself. I mean, absolutely. I mean, that is definitely one that you would think would be eligible for the National Register. And in fact, our planner has written a whole thesis on it that's this thick. So a lot of the research has already been done. So if we have some Euclid Heights residents who are interested, maybe you could get together and do that.
Does that include Euclid Boulevard?
I'm sorry?
Euclid Heights allotment, what streets, general streets?
Let's see, could we page all the way back to that map, maybe, Hugh, that very first map. We'll point out where that is. But that's basically Euclid Heights Boulevard north of Cedar Road. And the other border would be Cleveland, and the other border would be Coventry. And I believe Mayfield Road would be the northern boundary of that, approximately. So it's a pretty large area, which is one of the reasons I think it's probably difficult to do, because there's a lot of data collection you have to do there. This is the map here. Yep. You can see this. And Euclid Heights, as we're talking about here, is this whole big area here, Coventry, Mayfield, to the edge of Edge Hill and Overlook there, and Cedar Road would be the southern boundary of it. It's a huge area.
But it has, commercial, it has all sorts of things.
It's got a lot of great things in it. Let's see, this question over here.
First of all, I want to commend you on this, both of you. This is a really tremendous amount of research. I can tell it was just unbelievable amount of hours of research and reading. And it's just a wonderful thing for a labor of love. It's hard to believe you were under salary to produce something.
We wish we were.
Yeah.
I have just a couple questions. Did Rockefeller, first of all, I guess, why was Rockefeller even involved in land speculation? I guess just he had so much money, didn't know what to do with it. Because I know he owned tremendous amounts of pieces of land.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he really owned quite a bit of property in Cleveland Heights and East Cleveland in particular, and I'm not really sure the answer to that question. Why was Rockefeller involved in real estate? I think he must have thought it was a good investment, or he would not have been. He had a whole, Abington Realty Company was a specific company that he had set up to deal with nothing but his real estate transactions.
Now, did he own Euclid Golf or sell it to the Demings, or just the Demings were agents for Rockefeller?
What happened was that Barton Roy Deming came up with a proposal to develop Euclid Golf, and it was one of several that had been presented to Rockefeller, and it was the one that he decided to go with. And Barton Deming worked out a purchase agreement. Barton Deming couldn't afford to purchase Euclid Golf outright from Rockefeller. So he worked out a purchase agreement that he would go ahead and start developing it, start selling lots. And if he met his goals, his financial goals to Rockefeller, then he would own the property. Well, a couple years into it, he started running into problems. One of the problems he ran into was that Calhoun, the developer of Euclid Heights, went bankrupt, and the rest of the property was sold at sheriff's sale. So people could buy a lot up in Euclid Heights for next to nothing. Why were they going to pay top dollar for something down in Euclid Golf? So immediately he ran into problems, and he had to refinance with Rockefeller. He also needed Rockefeller's help because he needed to put in utility lines and sewers and lighting and all of those things that he needed to do, and he needed the cash to do that. Not only did he need Rockefeller's cash, but he also needed his influence. And Rockefeller was a very influential person in Cleveland. If you have a lot of money, I guess you are. And so Barton Deming relied on that too. That's kind of interesting. And eventually he did meet the financial obligation, was able to purchase the allotment outright from Rockefeller. And that was in 1920. Question of Karen.
Is the city going to provide signage to publicize the fact that presumably we get on the National Register as it does for Fairmount Boulevard, so that people coming through will know?
Well, we talked about that a little bit with Kara, and those Fairmount Boulevard signs, which are also at Forest Hill, those cost about a couple $1,000s a piece. And there are many, many, many entrances to Euclid Golf, as you can see. And so we decided that probably is not the most cost-effective way to do it. But we did talk about, at least preliminarily, something similar to what is done at Ohio City and Little Italy, where the street signs have a little flag on them to designate the neighborhood. And that might be a way. We haven't explored the cost yet, so we don't know. But we are talking about it.
We hope to be able to do that, and we hope that the city would approve that, and but the challenge might be finding a way to pay for it, but we really do want to do that.
Load another bond.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, other questions? There's a question here.
Is someone going to publish your research? Because it would be wonderful. I think some people would probably like to purchase that.
Well, one thing that we are doing, and it's in preparation right now, is we're putting together a website, and all of the information that you've seen and a lot more is going to be on the website, and that's under construction right now. I mean, we've got mounds of information. We'll even have a database so that people could access the database and find out, you know, they can put in an address and find out who the architect was, and so we are preparing the website right now, and hopefully that'll be ready in about June or July, about the time when we're getting on the register. So that we're going to do right away. We would love to publish some other way, but we'll see.
Yep.
Yes,
Question
ma'am.
up here.
Has anybody written up some of the people who lived in the area? I'm thinking of just off the top of my head, Charles Francis Rush and Benjamin Spock. I mean, it's different as that.
Not to my knowledge, I haven't seen anything
It would be interesting.
published on that, but that might be something for future research. I mean, really, I kind of see this as a beginning. We've uncovered a lot of information, but hopefully there are people out there that say, oh, I know something about a little piece of what you did, and expand upon it, because there are really some fascinating people who are not only original homeowners, but people who just lived in the neighborhood subsequently.
Deanna, we're in the early stages of putting together a famous persons tour of that area of Cleveland Heights that will be on the Historical Society's website within the next couple of months.
This is Chris Roy, who is in charge of the Historical Society's website. So he's
And by the way, it's the Historical Society that's hosting the Euclid Golf website. So
Yes. Do we have other questions? It's kind of hard for me to see.
yeah, it's hard to see.
Yes.
When you mentioned just social history, when you mentioned deed restrictions, did that include religious and racial restrictions?
Not in Euclid Golf. The restrictions that we mentioned had to deal with incompatible uses, setbacks, investment levels, landscaping approval. They wanted the architects to approve the landscaping, but that's it. Other questions?
I have
Yes.
another question, if you will entertain it. I grew up right over Shaker Heights, right by, I don't know, right in front of Woodbury Middle School, I think it's called. And there's what they call Bicycle Jungle, which was what we call it, but I think it's now called Sutherland Park. And there's a little creek that runs through there. And there's a bridge across that creek. And there's a similar, almost exact carbon copy bridge that goes across the dam by the lower Shaker Lake near Coventry. And I've always wondered if those were part of some interurban or trolley car system that came up Fairmont, went down Coventry, and I don't know where it went, but I've never been able to figure out who built these old bridges.
Well, he's talking about the bridges, and I don't believe that those were in connection with the streetcar service. Actually, it was a park. I mean, Shaker Lakes is owned by the city of Cleveland. All along Doan Brook there, that's all Cleveland parkland, and it was parkland, and so they built things like that. There was even a canoe club on the Shaker Lakes at one time. So there are a lot of structures there that were built in the late 1800s, early 1900s, some of which still exist and some of which don't.
Before we run out of time here, one person that we really, really want to thank for helping us through this process is Kara Hamley O'Donnell from the city. Kara really gave us a tremendous amount of guidance to get us through the labyrinth of applications. She's been through this before, and just we couldn't have done it without her, so we really, really appreciate that.
Do we have a couple more questions?
Yes.
Yes, one way in the back. You know what? Okay, Kara is going to pass the mic.
We're taping this, and it's going to be available on our cable channel, and you can check it out at the library, too. So I want to get the questions on the tape.
I'm lucky enough to have the original plans for our house in the basement. I'm wondering if you have any advice about preserving them, what I should do to, because they're just rolled up in the basement, literally. Is there some way that I can keep them?
You should, I don't know of one to go to, but you really should take those to a conservator and have them deacidified, because usually the blueprints are on highly acid paper and they just disintegrate. You might try the Western Reserve Historical Society as a starting point to ask who to send them to.
You can actually grab my card and I can give you some information on that too. Or-
The architect firms that you put on there, I have a name of one architect firm that you didn't mention, but I don't know if they did any architectural work in this area. How would I go about researching that particular firm or name?
What is the name of the firm?
Skeel, S-K-E-E-L. They were architects back, and I don't know if the name came up.
The name sounds familiar.
There's, I think, one
They
house.
did Bratnaugh, South Park, in different areas, Deaconess Hospital and Skeel Terrace on Miles Avenue. I was wondering if that name came up at all.
I think there's one house in Euclid Golf that was done. I think it's Albert Skeel. If I'm,
Yeah, that's mine.
try. You can start out by looking in is it Hugh Hanson's book?
And
Cleveland Architecture. Kara, any other ideas?
The Cleveland Public Library has some files on architects. I think it's in the arts section. If you call me at the office, I have the phone number. Also, Western Reserve Historical Society is a great place for just all kinds of general information. They have an architect's file as well.
And if none of those are successful, just treat Art Skeel, is that what you said?
I think that's the name.
If we think that's what the name is, and Skeel is a pretty unusual name, I would think that you could start with the necrology index and put that name in and see if you can find a date of death and an obituary to give you some information on that person. And then that may lead you to information about the firm itself.
I have seen copies of plates, and these are photographic plates that I believe were prepared by Howell and Thomas or perhaps Deming as part of the marketing effort. They were at one point presented to the city of Cleveland Heights as part of arguments over top of the hill years ago from an architectural historian. But I remember being told at the time that the plates still existed and were located in Cleveland. You know, those are actual photographs of a lot of the houses. Were they plates for this magazine that you mentioned, or were they...
We don't know anything about them. We haven't seen those, but they certainly could have been the original photographs for the brochures. Deming did lots of photography as part of his...
I have copies.
Do you? I'd like to talk to you.
Any other questions?
Are there any remnants of the Gulf house, the clubhouse that was at Norfolk and North Cedar?
It's half of it's a parking lot, and the other half there's some houses on. In fact, Chris, I think your parents' house is on one of them, right?
We could do an archaeological dig.
Yeah.
We do have those wonderful postcards that they showed up there, and here at the schoolhouse we're working on building a photographic archive as well as a postcard archive, and those images are two of the postcards that we do have here in our collection.
Also, you may not have noticed this when you came in, but in the glass case there are some photos that we have from the Demings that were donated to the city of Cleveland Heights, and so those are there in the glass case.
That's another example. Those were from Weston Schmidt, who was Deming's grandson. And that's another example of a family just being thrilled that we contacted them and took an interest. And you know, what he said was if no one had taken an interest in these, they would have just probably been thrown out eventually. And he said, I'd like to donate them to the city. So it really is worth it. And people really do like to, you're not imposing on people. They enjoy it.
Does it look like it? All right. Is there another question? No? No? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Good job.
Real quickly, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out. And also, we are planning probably in the next couple months on doing a workshop on how to research your home. So I didn't realize they were going to be talking about that. And also, there's a flyer that I created just because I get a lot of calls from residents. And there's a bunch of them at the back as you walk out. Also, it's available on the city's website, www.clevelandheights.com, under the Historic Architecture section. So thanks to Deanna and Hugh. We just are thrilled to have neighbors taking interest in their neighborhoods. And any of you who don't live in Euclid Golf and would like to talk about doing something similar to that, we're happy to hear about it. And thanks for coming out.